This episode is brought to you by Shopify. Do you have a point of sale system you can trust, or is it a real POS? You need Shopify for retail. From accepting payments to managing inventory, Shopify POS has everything you need to sell in person. Go to shopify.com/system, all lowercase, to take your retail business to the next level today. That's shopify.com/system.
Today on CityCast Portland, we're talking about Portland Public Schools' new superintendent pick, the city foreclosing on abandoned buildings, and the end of Pamplin Media. Joining me on this week's Friday News Roundup are Willamette Week reporter and author Brianna Wheeler and our very own executive producer, John Notarianni. It's Friday, June 7th. I'm Claudia Meza, and this is what Portland's talking about. Welcome, everyone, to the Friday News Roundup. Brianna, John, thank you for hanging out with me.
Hey, how's it going?
Of course. Hello.
Yeah, happy Pride Month, everyone, even to the straights. For all of our new listeners, today is the day we break down some of the biggest local stories of the week with some of the best and brightest journalists in town. And if you're new to the show, I usually ask an opening question so our listeners can get to know our guests a little better. And this week, my opening question is actually tied to a correction that a listener emailed in. So, Brianna, this past Tuesday, John and I had a river-themed midweek roundup. We've been having a river-themed week.
Love that.
It's a whole thing. And we talked about the Port of Portland's troubles with its container shipping port, which is situated in Terminal 6. If you weren't aware, that's one of Portland's major hubs for international cargo, and it's considered a major trade route for local business and agriculture. Mm-hmm. So it wasn't doing well financially. It hasn't been doing well financially. So the Port of Portland was going to shut it down, which, as we stated, would cost the state $20 million in tax revenue and an estimated 1,500 jobs. So then Governor Kotek came in and promised $40 million in state funds to allow the terminal's container service to continue. So you were all caught up, right? Well, a listener of ours who works at the Port of Portland heard the episode and wanted just to clarify a few points. One, we stated all of Terminal 6 would be shut down. And she's like, no, actually just the container operations. Other marine shipping would have continued in that terminal. Also, they want us to say that the $40 million hasn't been given yet. They're like, we still have to vote on it. And also, like, not all of it is going to go to container shipping. It's going to actually just go to the overall terminal's infrastructure. Thank you to our listener who works at the Port of Portland.
I'm just pleased that I didn't get any corrections on my highly speculative segment on Herman the Sturgeon. I was sure I was going to get a correction on that because I was like, I'm not really sure.
Who's going to correct you by saying, is he even alive? Anyhow, this brings us to our opening question. This Port of Portland correction kind of became a running joke among us about how off our seemingly fact-checked facts were on these points. So to salve our ego, we started coming up with this running joke about fake facts about the port just to amuse ourselves. And John actually did trick me with one. John, do you want to explain which one? I actually was like, what? And it's embarrassing.
We were working on another story, and I was like, yeah, because there's whales right outside of the Port of Portland.
And I was like,
Claudia was like, there's whales in the river right now? I'm like, no, it's not true.
Think about that, Brianna. In freshwater, I was just like, there's what? Where? How? And she was like, Claudia, the joke, no. So my opening question is, of course, and we mean no disrespect. This is just something we've been joking about all week. What's a fun fact about the Port of Portland that isn't true, but could be? Like someone as smart, worldly, and well-read as like me would believe it.
Yeah, I'm ready to roll. A little-known fact about the Port of Portland's financial troubles is that in the mid-'90s, they transitioned to an all-jet ski model where they would just bring individual pieces of cargo into the port on the back of ski-doos.
That is highly believable. Well, did you guys know that all through the 70s and most of the 80s, there was a gay bar that operated out of an abandoned cargo container in Terminal 6? They called it the Large Barge. And though it did have its longshore regulars, it actually just became like the after-hours place. that everyone would gather during Fleet Week. Large barge. #Pride.
That sounds like an aspirational future. That sounds like something that should actually happen if there's any entrepreneurs out there.
Looking for investors.
Yeah, DL at the LB.
Oh my
What
God.
about you, Brianna?
I don't know. Maybe mermaids? Something about mermaids?
Oh. They're the new longshoremen. The mermaids. They're like, should we dredge this route? Nah, let's just let the ladies take care of it.
Hey, don't gender my mermaids and mermen.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Not during Pride Month.
Merm people.
The merfolk.
Oh, there we go. Apologies to everyone. I am a #ally. All right, on to the news of the week. So, Brianna, what headline did you want to talk about?
Well, I would love to talk about the new superintendent that has finally been chosen for Portland Public Schools. Whew, after a 6-month search, we have finally chosen a new superintendent. So I'm pulling from an article by Julia Silverman at The Oregonian, and she reports that Dr. Kimberly Armstrong, who actually served as Portland's chief academic officer for a short time, just a little over a year, mid-2022 to mid-2023. She's going to be the first Black woman to serve as the top leader of Portland Public Schools. Pew, 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 pew.
That's pretty big.
Right?
Yeah.
She was also unanimously voted in, which is also just amazing and awesome. Considering how discordant the board can be. So Dr. Armstrong is going to lead the district, about 45,000 students, about 8,000 employees. But the lead is that she's going to be overseeing this $2.4 billion budget. Mm-hmm. And it's important to note that Dr. Armstrong comes from the Evergreen School District, and she was serving as the deputy superintendent for Evergreen School District. And she came in after their strike and did a clean house, making amends, building bridges arrangement there that apparently went over like gangbusters. So she comes so highly recommended with just such a pedigree. And she's like hella West Coast. We love that. She's been working in high schools, schools, even as like a sports coach, all up and down California, Washington, Oregon. Now she lives here in Oregon. So she kind of has this like a connection to the community that maybe we haven't seen before in our superintendents. So that's exciting also. She's got some really amazing plans. It's very exciting stuff for Portland. So when she was the chief academic officer here in 2022, 2023, she switched from that kind of standard grading model to something called an equitable grading model. And that emphasizes a student's ability to show that they've mastered an academic skill. And it glosses over these traditional markers like turning in homework, meeting deadlines, passing pop quizzes, in favor of like, did the child learn this? Can the child demonstrate a mastery over the subject?
I will say, Brianna, when I read that, I was just like, maybe meeting deadlines is something that a child should learn. But I was just, but that was just like the like old man in me. Because everything else I was like, yeah, fuck homework and like pop, like whatever. But I was like, deadlines is something that we should all maybe learn about in our lives. But I don't know. I'm sorry. Go on.
Yeah, you know what? That's is that capitalism talking, or is that your heart?
Is it? I mean, maybe, I don't know. Maybe I'm just like not radicalized enough. And I'm just like, I kind of just expect things to happen if someone says it's going to, but maybe I'm thinking of like personal responsibility or something and not.
Here comes conservative Claudia.
Oh my God.
I hear you. I feel you. I believe it too. I also agree that these things shouldn't be paramount.
Yeah, also, like, when they say about equity, I'm just like, do you think people of color can meet deadlines? Like, I don't know. There's something about it that just, like, irks me. I'm just like, it's deadlines. It's not like any... Go on. They're like, the poors and the browns, deadlines. They don't get it.
Yeah, that was something to there's this, like, serious focus on, we have to get the reading and math skills up for Black and Indigenous students. But I feel fairly confident that it's not just Black and Indigenous students that are lagging behind.
I know.
Yeah. I kind of feel like that's the language of Portland, how Portland, when the government has to communicate with the city, it's, oh no, we're very focused. We're very focused on our Black children and the indigenous children. All these white kids can go fuck themselves. I know that that's not necessarily what they're saying, but
we careened off, but it also makes it so it does feel contentious. You know?
It does, yes.
Yeah.
And it can also, this might be a little bit out of pocket, but Dr. Armstrong could not be more qualified for this position. We could not be more honored to have her in this position. But when they're using language like this, again, this might sound a little bit out of pocket, but it kind of feels like they're making her sound like a stunt hire or like a diversity hire and not the person that is obviously and inarguably the best person for the job.
I hear that. Yeah.
Right? Anyway, Dr. Armstrong is going to start on July 1st, right in time for summer vacation. Awesome. Thank you. So yeah, this new hire could signal a new dawn for Portland Public Schools. And oh my goodness, how wonderful would that be? Yay. We love it. We love it.
I totally agree that she just looks so perfectly qualified in like the long run of her career and in some of her specific experiences. But man, what a brutal job this is going to be.
Oh my gosh.
You know, with like,
Right?
you know, just parents and teachers' trust at an all-time low. Plus, there's probably going to need to be another round of budget cuts pretty soon. That, you know, that is not a great way to ingratiate yourself to a group of people that is like already kind of not having a lot of faith in district leadership. I commend the courage of stepping into that job. Yeah. Plus, you have to start in July. I mean, come on. That's as in education. That's just not fair.
Yeah.
Well, when I was reading this, I was like, oh, Brianna's so excited. Like, this is her girl. This is her girl. Especially when they're just like, Armstrong's son was born with a rare genetic syndrome that led to learning disabilities.
Exactly.
So she's like really invested in special education services. And I was like, Brianna is just like, yes.
Yes. Brianna has flooded her basement. She is so excited about this.
She's so stoked.
I'm stoked.
Yeah, the one thing that I was heartened by when I read this whole thing is that she was just like, I plan to retire here. And I know the school district has been burned before by people using them as a stepping stone. And they're actually a little like, is the next person just going to go back to LA or to, some other big city and kind of just, hop along? And she's just like, no, my kids graduated from high school here. Like, this is where I live. And I'm just like, yay.
Me too. Yay.
Also speaks to like the fickleness of Portlanders, where like in one round of leadership, we are so eager to throw city council members and district attorneys out after one term. And then in schools, we're like, no, stay. We don't want you to leave.
They're like, don't make us do that all over again.
Seriously.
Yeah. Well, Brianna, thank you so much for bringing us that. I hope, fingers crossed, that she does a bang up job and that everyone's stoked and that the school district doesn't shut down for 6 months again.
Best of luck.
I just made that up. It wasn't 6 months, but I'm just like,
it fucking felt like it.
Oh my God. Please.
All right, well, let's take a quick break here, and when we come back, more headlines of the week.
Hey, it's John from CityCast Portland. Let's face it, sometimes bad stuff happens. A serious injury, a catastrophic accident, even a wrongful death. It can really turn your world upside down. And when it does, you deserve unwavering support from a dedicated team. Yeah, you need a lawyer. D'Amour Law Group has over 30 years of experience protecting the rights of Oregonians. Their team of skilled attorneys, led by the renowned trial lawyer Tom D'Amour, will work tirelessly to make sure your voice is heard and your rights are protected. Here's what one of his clients said. Tom fights for his clients from the first day they meet him through the last day of trial. So if you need help holding those responsible for your injuries accountable, contact D'Amour Law Group at 503-222-6333 or visit d'amourlaw.com to schedule a free consultation. They're committed to fighting for the justice and compensation you deserve right here in Portland.
This episode is brought to you by Shopify. Do you have a point of sale system you can trust, or is it a real POS? You need Shopify for retail. From accepting payments to managing inventory, Shopify POS has everything you need to sell in person. Go to shopify.com/system, all lowercase, to take your retail business to the next level today. That's shopify.com/system.
Okay, so this week my headline is coming from reporters Elise Haas of Coin 6 and some of your Willamette Week colleagues, Brianna, Sophie Peel, and Anthony Effinger, all who have been guests before on the show, not to brag. Anyhow, this Wednesday, City Council voted to move toward foreclosing on the former Gordon's Fireplace Shop. That's at Northeast 33rd Ave and Northeast Broadway. I'm sure we've all seen it. It's like heavily tagged. It's across from the 84 and a Shell station, maybe half a block away from the Grant Park New Seasons. I'm saying all this as a bookmark because that's also interesting. Anyhow, businesses and people in the area consider it a blight in the neighborhood, and recently bricks and pieces from the building were reported to have been randomly falling down. Also, it's like where homeless people congregate, so that's another reason why people aren't into that whole thing. Ugly tags, falling bricks, homeless people. You can imagine, Yeah. So just a bit of context. Portland City Council regularly does vote to foreclose on vacant and dilapidated buildings that have accrued significant tax liens. And according to city documents, the owners of the Gordon building owes City Hall more than $20,000 in its enforcement fee stemming from its condition. And they also haven't been in contact with the city for at least the past 6 months. So they're just like, all right, we got to move on this. But here's why this foreclosure is controversial to some. So Gordon's Fireplace Shop has been vacant since 2016. Before that, 61 years of just selling random ass equipment needed to upkeep your fireplace, as well as some furniture. It really was like Gordon's Fireplace Shop. But at the end of 2017, Rob Brewster bought the building for $2.7 million, which is kind of really cheap. And his first idea, he was just like, I'm going to develop some creative office spaces. But then the pandemic hit, and he's like, I'm going to create 2 floors of housing over retail, something we've seen a lot. Yeah. Then the pandemic came, and it slowed the city bureaus to a crawl. I know this from experience because I, too, was trying to pull some permits around then, but luckily, I don't have any money tied to my permits, I was just like, I like to do this. So Brewster says permitting was supposed to take 8 months. It took 14 months.
Whoa.
And he was quoted as saying, it got caught up in issues around the city requiring that we provide new signal at the intersection and redesign the infrastructure at the intersection, which is highly unreasonable.
What?
Meanwhile, building materials skyrocketed during the pandemic, then came inflation, and then the Bureau of Development Services slapped them with another $50,000 in fines after complaints about the vacant structure. Who was complaining? And now they're foreclosing on it, which they have the legal right to do. But Brewster, the developer, has made it very clear to anyone who will listen that the city had a part in the building's state and has brought the project to a halt many times. So he was like, I was bled dry. But the city just points to the fact that they've had all the necessary permits since 2022, and they've done nothing to even just secure the building to prevent it from literally falling down or from people to going inside and causing trouble, And according to city staff, they've gotten 31 calls between June 2023 and May 2024. And all those were calls of disorders. They're saying, people just being like, oh, it's ugly. And there's excessive trash and debris and just unlawful occupants. So before I go any further, what do you guys think?
I'm skeptical. I mean, a building like this, and this is a tax foreclosure, right? We're not talking about a mortgage. We're talking about someone who stopped paying taxes on a building that they bought a couple years before for several $1 million. So if they are, going broke over a couple $1,000s in taxes,
it's not a couple thousand, John.
$20,000 in taxes, whatever. There's no way that that the investment was going to work out for a multi-million-dollar renovation, because this thing sold so cheap that it was probably going to cost $30-40 million to renovate this building. To me, this just sort of sounds like the same way that some businesses will say, retail's oh, we're closing because of crime. It's no, you're closing because you weren't making money and you're just blaming the city. That's what this reads to me like.
Yeah. What about you, Brianna?
I remember when we covered this last year, that building is so iconic. That intersection is so iconic. I could not get over the city wanting him to what did they expect him to do to that intersection? And why is that his responsibility? I get it. Like, so the conversation that we were having, last year about this was like, the city makes it so hard to do anything. So you're kind of like, dang, I feel for the guy. I know somebody's throwing money around like a motherfucker and then like isn't paying their taxes. It's hard to feel sorry for that person. But I did feel like some form of like empathy, like you said, he will tell anyone who will listen how impossible it is to work with the city of Portland. And he's not the only one. He's not the only one telling that story.
That's the truth. And that's what I was going to say. I was like, here's the deal. This isn't the first we've heard about the city slowly bleeding developers.
Yes.
This isn't like, what? I mean, it's been said so many times, the city's finally doing something about it. They're like, what if we like stop our permitting from being all over the place and just concentrate it so they don't have to get 3 yeses, 2 no's, and then start from the beginning. Yeah. Because that's what was happening. I'm
just saying the numbers don't add up, right? Like, you don't lose a building that you bought for several $1 million that is going to take tens of millions of dollars in renovations because you can't pay a $20,000 tax bill.
Yeah, but here's the deal, John. You're not thinking about all of the other money that he's had to take out loans for that he's been paying this whole time. When a developer takes out business loans to build something, the moment that money hits his account, he's already having to pay interest and money back on that.
Yeah.
And if he's held that loan for longer than he expected because he thought the building would be up, he's fucked.
Yeah.
He's out of money. So what I'm saying, it's not just the $20K, it's the fact that like it went over a year and he's just like, it's supposed to take 8 months. I planned for 8 months. Again, best business plan is to be rich. But like, I'm just saying he might have like a bit of a point. I mean, we do the math. It does seem like, well, since 2017, dude, like, come on, it's 2024.
Yeah, there's just such bigger headwinds in terms of development in the city right now, which we'll be talking about on the show next week, Claudia.
Yeah.
And like, it does sort of like ruffle me when someone's business deal falls through. They blame the city and like, it feels disingenuous to me.
Well, here's the deal. There are so many Gordon's fireplace shops all around the city. Like, there's a lot of these buildings. So much so that Anthony Effinger created an entire series at Willamette Week to document these buildings. And a lot of them also have tax liens. So all I could assume is that this was extremely complaint-driven.
Yeah.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because like next to it is a really nice building now with like fancy apartments and above a New Seasons. I can only imagine they're just like, get out of here.
Totally. Very that.
And it's right along the freeway. I think that this is a big part of it too, is that it's not in a neighborhood where it's tucked away. It's like a lot of people can drive by and see it and they're just sort of like, that looks scary, And
I can confidently say that the city and the county love appearances. And we can point to a lot of reasons of that. Not actual, like, numbers of things working, but, like, it looks like it's working. Let's move on. But I wish the city... Here's the last thing I'll say about that. Because it's clearly, I picked the story because I wanted to say this.
It's all been leading up to this hot take.
So I wish the city could find a way to work with developers and landlords who own perfectly sound buildings. We're not talking about the Gordon fireplaces in the world. We're talking about like the really like, okay, that's a nice storefront in a nice neighborhood and it's been empty for like 5 years. And here's what's going on. We just learned about it, John, is that they're refusing to rent out anything below what they speculatively told the bank they were going to be making. Because again, all of this is loans. This is not like they have the money they paid for it. Nobody owns this stuff. It's the banks own this stuff. So if they refuse to rent out these retail spaces to small businesses that are hoping to bring life to a neighborhood, because then, that drives down the overall worth of their building to the lender. And of course, like, these are outside developers. These are like Brewster. He doesn't fucking live here. They don't care about the neighborhood. So we can have shuttered storefronts for years and they could just sit on it because they're just like, tax write-off, building continues accruing, equity, like whatever. So like St. John's has a few retail spaces all owned by the same dude and he's asking insane prices for people to move in. So there's like almost 2 blocks in our downtown area where every other retail space is just empty and it's that dude. And he doesn't live here. that to me is more just like, I know appearances, it's a nice open retail space, but how cool would it be if the city actually did something about that?
Yeah.
You know? That's all. End of rant over, John.
I agree with the rant, and I agree with, like, I'm so glad that we had the permitting reform. Yeah, something about the whole Gordon's fireplace, like all the kerfuffle of it bothers me.
I hear you.
Yeah.
No, I completely hear what you're saying. I do want to say that Julia, our producer, does have a hot take, and her hot take is that she really liked that building.
Heck yeah.
She's like, actually, I really liked looking at that building. And
a good look.
here at CityCast Portland, everyone has their say. So that is Julia's hot take. John, what's your headline of the week?
Oh my gosh, not to dampen the mood, but the Media Black Monday, as it's being called in Oregon. Leaning on a bunch of reporting from this, Nigel Jaquist, Lucas Manfield at Willamette Week, Breer Dudley at Seattle Times, Kyra Buckley at OPB, Mike Rogaway at the Oregonian. Two pretty major news chains just announced major changes in Oregon this week. Pamplin Media calls itself Oregon's largest newspaper group, announced plans to sell to Carpenter Media Group. That's a company in Mississippi. They do 23 newspapers across Oregon, including the Portland Tribune. At the same time, Salem-based EO Media announced that it's laying off 28 of the company's 185 employees this month. 19 more are going to see their hours reduced, plus they're putting the company up for sale. That's the company that does about 15 publications, including papers like The Historian and the Bend Bulletin. I think these are two really different companies, but they both came through at the same time. But for all of the communities across Oregon that aren't right here in Portland, this is like a huge, huge deal. And yeah, pretty dispiriting. What do you guys think?
It's a harbinger of doom. It's sad, and it makes me scared for my future as a writer for the public, for sure. It's the way the tide is turning. It's like, it's very much like a gut punch, but also like the gut punch that you expected. You know, it's not a surprise.
Yeah.
So I was always under the impression that people didn't like Pamplin Media. So I was also very sorry. I'm sorry. Am I saying it out loud? Am I saying the quiet part out loud?
Pamplin is weird, and like I can. Do you want me to like go down the rabbit hole of all the ways that like Pamplin is strange? So it's from this like industrialist family. Robert Pamplin Sr. owned like a bunch of textile mills. He also ran Ross Island Sand and Gravel. So it was started by his son, Pamplin Jr. And like the story is basically he started this newspaper chain because he was mad at the Oregonian of like an investigation into Ross Island Sand and Gravel. So he started this like little local media empire. He'd already owned some like Christian broadcasting and this and that. So yeah, people did look at it when it started as like a sort of like conservative cudgel. But like I will give credit over the years that has sort of been ironed out, and that they have hired some like really great journalists. Like people who've been on the show got their start at Pamplin Media. So it's not, it didn't really pan out to be that like crazy sort of conservative counterweight that some people were afraid of, even though it still sort of has that aroma in some ways.
It does have that sheen, yes.
Yeah. Well, here's the deal. Here's what I think is really interesting, John, is that we literally just wrapped up a River Week, and one of the big things we found out
was about
this is
algae,
amazing. This is when I was just like, oh my God, is our entire world just like always interconnected? Because I feel like our stories always like kind of build on each other. But we found out from Willie, who is like the dude in charge of Human Access Project, that the reason we have these yearly harmful algae blooms is because of the freaking Ross Island structure and how his family made it.
Yeah.
And I just think it's so funny because we're just like, oh my God, we just learned this. And then they're just like, the dude who owns the island who ruined the river. And I was like, what is this, Chinatown? Like, I just feel like it's all connected, like the movie. You know what I'm talking about, the movie? He also owned a paper.
I haven't seen Chinatown in 20 years, and all I remember is that Jack Nicholson had like a Band-Aid on his nose or something.
All I'm saying is we are Jack Nicholson.
we are all Jack Nicholson.
Okay.
I mean,
go on. Sorry.
I'm totally happy to like sort of like chuckle about like the wackiness of Pamplin and especially how it came into being. But like, I don't want to lose what's happening with EO as we talk about Pamplin, because like they are the real super awesome company. It's a family-run publisher. They have about a dozen papers, and they really have done so much for like the news ecosystem in some of the smaller cities in our state. They bought the Bend Bulletin out of bankruptcy in 2019. They opened a new paper in Medford last year because the Mail Tribune there had closed. They really are like doing it right. And the fact that they're having like significant trouble and aren't able to make it work is just like, just hurts my heart.
Yeah.
You know?
I mean, I know a lot of people were really bummed because it is, like you said, Brianna, it's a harbinger of doom. You know, you see a lot of people drowning and you're like, am I next? You know?
Yeah.
Because we're all in the same pool, buddy, you know?
Totally.
And I do just think it's so different in like smaller communities, right? Like we all live in Portland. We get our news from Portland. And I think that we live in a pretty robust local news ecosystem.
Oh
I
my
think,
God,
like,
we do.
You know what I mean? Like there are so many brilliant reporters to like help us understand what's going on here. But like in somewhere like Astoria, in Hermiston, in LeGrand, you know, in Baker City, aside from Astoria, all of those things I just listed, they're going to cease publication of print editions, you know? And so for those sorts of places, like, if like, give me a benevolent billionaire.
Right?
If we could just find
You know,
one.
who's our favorite billionaire? Who's our favorite Oregon? Like the Dutch bro? Is he a good guy?
Oh my God, is the Dutch bro cool?
I don't know. Dutch bro, come on, show us where you're at. Buy some local news media.
Does he understand that local media is underwater?
If you're out there, Mr. Bro.
Listen here, Mr. Bro. Or just one of them, because isn't it bros?
You're right.
Yeah.
There's several bros involved.
Heed John's call. Oh, man. Well, you guys, thank you so much for coming out, hanging out. But before we wrap up, Brianna, you have something to share with the class.
I do. Thank you, teacher. I would like to share that this coming June 15th, I will be at the Back Fence storytelling event, telling a mortifying tale that I will not spoil because it is going to be excellently embarrassing.
I can't wait.
Yeah, there's going to be like 4 or 5 storytellers at Powell's Pearl Room, and you can get your tickets at backfencepdx.com.
You know what we're going to do? We're going to put a link in the show notes.
A little link in the show notes.
Considering some of the stories you have told on this show, Brianna, I am so curious to know what this is. If it's too hot for CityCast, get me there.
Actually, yeah, I think it is. It's
What?
yeah.
Oh
Yeah.
boy.
Oh my God, I can't imagine. Okay, I'm excited about that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, John, Brianna, as always, a pleasure to host you. Thank you so much for hanging out with me. And thank you, everyone, for listening.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
That's all for today here on CityCast Portland. Thank you so much for listening. Our executive producer is John Notarianni. Our producer is Julia Fiaioni. Our Hey Portland newsletter editor is Rachel Monahan, with contributions from Adrian Gonzalez. Our host is me, Claudia Meza. Original music by Jenny Conley and Stephen Drizos. Additional music by Epidemic Sound and All the Kimonos. We'll be back Monday morning with more from around the city. Until then, see you at Slim's.